In March of 1945, one road in western Germany stopped moving. Not because of tanks, not because of mines, because one German corporal had turned the daylight into a weapon. For 8 mornings, American trucks reached the same stretch of road and slowed without anyone ordering them to. Officers stopped standing upright over maps. Runners waited for fog. Engineers stopped working until the sun was high enough to blind the ridge. By then, the damage was already done. 16 men had been hit in 8 days. 5 of them were officers. All of them were shot from places that looked empty by the time anyone looked back. The men began calling it the Dead Mile. The headquarters reports called it something colder: disciplined enemy rifle activity along the Alzey Road. Patton read those reports for 3 days before he gave the order that ended it: find the man. By that point, the Third Army was moving fast enough that most German units in front of it were no longer trying to win. They were trying to survive contact. Some fought. Many surrendered. Others simply vanished into villages and tree lines and waited for the Americans to pass. But this corporal had not vanished. He moved only after midnight. He slept in barns, ruined wash-houses, and collapsed attics. He wrapped his rifle in sacking so moonlight would not catch the metal. He carried black bread, dried sausage, 2 canteens, and a small notebook marked with firing distances he had measured before the front collapsed around him. He was not holding a fortress. He was not protecting a bridge. He had no radio, no squad, no artillery behind him, and no promise that anybody would come back for him. And still, every morning he went to work. The first men hit were easy to explain away. Everyone was jumpy that close to the Rhine. The roads were crowded. Villages were full of shattered windows, and any farm wall could hide a man with a rifle. Then the pattern appeared. He fired at dawn. He chose officers first. He waited until a jeep stopped, until a lieutenant leaned over a map, until a captain stepped away from cover to wave traffic forward. He never fired more than once from the obvious place. Sometimes he never fired from the place at all. He would set a dirty coat over a broken window to pull American eyes one way, then shoot from a drainage cut 40 yards behind it. He had learned the American response time. He had learned which hedges scouts checked first. He had learned that men under fire look for a muzzle flash, not for the shadow that has already left. By the 5th day, the road was still open on paper. In practice, it had become a locked door. That was what bothered Patton. A road could be blocked by a blown bridge. A road could be blocked by mud. A road could be blocked by armor. But a road blocked by one unseen soldier meant the problem was not only tactical, it was psychological. One rifle had made hundreds of men imagine the next shot before it came. That was how an army slowed, not all at once. A man ducks, another man waits, a driver hesitates at the bend. A captain stops visiting the forward crews because he has already lost 2 officers that week, and soon the rifle is no longer shooting at men. It is shooting at movement itself. Patton understood that kind of pressure, because he understood what discipline looked like when it was stripped down to nothing. He had no admiration for the cause the man served, but he recognized the work. On the morning of March 22nd, 2 scouts from an armored infantry patrol noticed something that did not belong. There was frost on a small kitchen garden behind a burned farmhouse. The ground near the lane was clean. The ground near the back wall was not. Bootprints had crossed the garden before dawn, but only in the darker earth under the hedge where a man trying not to be seen would walk. The scouts did not rush the house. That had already killed men. They went around it. One man crawled to a broken cart. The other worked through the orchard, moving from trunk to trunk, until he could see a low shed built against the back wall. There was no smoke, no voice, no movement. Then a piece of sacking lifted in the shed window. Not much, just enough for a rifle barrel to clear the cloth. The scouts fired into the wall below the window and shouted for the man inside to come out. For 3 seconds nothing happened. Then the door opened. A German corporal stepped into the yard with both hands up. He was thin, unshaven, and so tired his face looked older than his uniform. His rifle came out first, held by the sling between 2 fingers, and he set it down carefully in the mud. He had 7 cartridges left in his pocket. He had 1 strip of bread wrapped in paper. He had 3 American map corrections drawn into a German road sheet, and in his notebook there were 16 entries. Not names, distances, times, weather, movement. The patrol wanted to know what to do with him. The battalion wanted to know whether he was the man from the road. The division wanted him identified before anyone touched him. The answer moved upward fast. When Patton heard they had him, he did not ask for a firing squad. He did not ask how many men were dead. He asked where the prisoner was. Then he said, "Bring him in." The corporal's name was Rifleman. He was 29 years old. He had been a hunter's son before the war, a rifle instructor after Poland, and a survivor of enough retreats to know the difference between courage and habit. When they brought him into the command room, Patton was standing beside a field table covered in maps. Ryman expected anger. That would have made sense. He expected someone to list the dead. That would have made sense too. Instead, Patton looked at him for a long moment and asked a question that surprised everyone in the room. "Show me how you did it." The interpreter repeated it. Ryman did not answer right away. Then he stepped closer to the map, not proudly, not theatrically. Like a man being asked about work he knew. He pointed to the orchard line first, then the culvert, then the ruined schoolhouse near the road bend. He explained that the Americans searched windows too quickly after the first shot, so he stopped using windows except as bait. He explained that officers could be identified not only by rank marks, but by the way other men turned toward them when a vehicle stopped. He explained that dawn mattered because men were cold, impatient, and thinking about movement instead of cover. He had not chosen the longest shots. He had chosen the shots that would change behavior. That was the part that made the room quiet. Raymond had not been trying to kill the most men. He had been trying to make the road feel watched. A dead man stopped 1 body. A frightened officer stopped a column. Patton listened without interrupting. He did not soften. He did not smile. He did not pretend the dead were a professional compliment, but he listened. When Ryman finished, Patton asked the second question. "Why did you stay after your unit left?" Ryman looked down at the map. For the first time, he seemed less certain of the shape of his own answer. "My order was to delay traffic on that road," he said through the interpreter. "No one gave me a new order. There it was. Not heroism, not madness, not some grand belief that one man could reverse the war. An order reduced to its smallest possible form. A road, a rifle. A soldier who had kept obeying after the army around him had disappeared." For a moment nobody spoke. Outside, trucks were moving again on the road Raymond had closed. The sound came faintly through the walls. Engines, chains, men shouting. The ordinary noise of an army that had remembered how to move. Patton turned to his aide. "Feed him," he said. The aide asked if there should be special handling. Patton looked back at Ryman. Was he in uniform when captured? Yes. Did he lay down the rifle? Yes. Then he is a prisoner. The aide waited, because everyone in the room understood what the man had done. 16 Americans were not an abstract number. They were bunks left empty, helmets handed back, letters that would travel home slower than the news itself. Patton did not ignore that. He simply refused to let anger make the army smaller than its own rules. He spoke once more, looking at the prisoner and not the interpreter. "You fought your post well," Patton said. "Now your post is finished." Ryman did not salute. He was not allowed to. He only nodded once. They gave him a hot meal in a tin plate. Potatoes, meat, coffee, nothing ceremonial, nothing warm enough to become forgiveness. Just food given to a captured soldier, because that was what the rules required when a man had surrendered in uniform and laid down his weapon. By afternoon he was processed with other prisoners. By evening the road crews were working without waiting for full daylight. The dead mile had a new name by the next week. Nobody said it out loud, they just drove it. That is how war often erases its own terror. A place that men whispered about on Monday becomes a road sign by Friday. Trucks pass over it. Dust settles. Someone points to a ditch and says that is where it happened. And someone else asks how far to the next bridge. But for the men who had lived under that rifle, the story did not end when the corporal surrendered. It ended in the command room, with the question Patton asked first, not why, how. Because How told him what kind of enemy had been in front of him. How told him why the road stopped. How told him how fear had entered the unit where it had hidden and how to cut it out. The corporal had done terrible work with professional discipline. Patton answered it with professional discipline of his own. He did not excuse the dead. He did not elevate the prisoner above them. He did not turn rage into policy just because rage would have been easier to understand. He separated what the man had done from what the army was allowed to do after capture. That difference is not soft. It is one of the hardest things soldiers are ever asked to hold. A man can be dangerous. A man can be guilty of killing your friends. A man can be the reason a road went silent for 8 mornings. And once he is captured in uniform, with his rifle on the ground, he can also be a prisoner. Those truths do not cancel each other. They test whether discipline survives victory. That was the lesson of the Alzey Road. One rifle had closed it. One order reopened it. And in the space between those two things, Patton showed the difference between winning a fight and remaining an army.